I'm back. Linda's gone. She's out there planning her conference that starts tomorrow. And some of the people that are going to be on this next roundtable are going to be involved in her conference too. So some of these ladies get around, most of these ladies get around a lot. I'm so honored, and this to me is one of the highlights of the conference this month, and that is to introduce you to some very special women. When I announce their names, you're going to recognize most of them, I think, because they're very active as advocates, and they're very knowledgeable about what needs to be done to improve conditions, situations, the life of the metastatic patient that is living with advanced breast cancer right this moment. I've been honored to be on a committee with them now for several years, and I've watched them grow together as a group, be able to crystallize the ideas of what needs to be done. They have helped refocus Susan G. Komen's attention on metastatic breast cancer. They've had a voice. They've had more of an effect that maybe the community knows. And because they, like most metastatic patients, are understandably very impatient, they may sometimes think they haven't accomplished a whole lot. But if they look back at the changes that have occurred, I think that they should be very proud of what they've been able to achieve individually and as a group. So I'm going to introduce them by name, and then we're going to go around the round table and let them tell you briefly about themselves and what they've been involved in. And then we're going to have some, nitty-gritty, down to the earth discussion about what we should be focusing on to improve the lives of the metastatic men and women that are living today with advanced breast cancer. And I'm going to start off with Dr. Kelly Shanahan. And she is one of the most articulate, and because she is a physician, she's a breast surgeon. She was anyway, before she became metastatic. Quite a lifestyle change, I'd say. But she understands things from a different angle than a non-medical professional might. And then there's Linda Weatherby. And Linda, I've known the longest from this group. And Linda is sort of the titular head of this committee. Whether she would accept that title of chairperson, I don't know, but that's kind of what she is, I think. And I go back with Linda for several years. We lobbied through 2 CEOs for the creation of this advisory group. And son of a gun, it finally happened. But if anybody made it happen, if I had to point to a single individual, Linda Weatherby made it happen. And then we have Terry Cohen. And now she's somebody that I didn't know that well until about a month ago. And I have learned a lot of things about her. And we've discussed like the identity crisis one goes through when one has to give up one's career because they've been impacted by metastatic breast cancer. And it's like losing your identity. All of a sudden, how do you introduce yourself to people? What do you call yourself? You're used to saying, I'm this highfalutin executive with this company. And that's what your identity was, and you lose it. Same thing with Dr. Kelly. She lost her identity in a sense. And then Jamil Rivers, who's newer to the group of metastatic patients, is maybe the most outstanding of us all, because she has this kind of calm, cool way, objective way of looking at the world, and knows can drive right to the core and right to the heart of an issue in a, I don't know, a balanced, objective way. She's truly a quantum thinker, I think. So I'm going to turn to this round table, and we're live streaming on Facebook, and we have this on Zoom, and we have it on Whova, and questions can be asked on all of those platforms. Someone is monitoring the stream of questions on those platforms and will bring them into the discussion. We want this to be an interactive discussion about what we should do as a community. What can we do collaboratively? How can we move the needle to improve the lives of the patients living with breast cancer right now? How can we advance the research that we think needs to be done? We'll have that as a topic too. Where should we focus our attention? How can we generate more research funding, and how can we direct it to what is the right thing to work on? There's some things that sound a little sexier than others, and maybe we want to explore new horizons. We want to think outside the box, because being in this box too long, it's getting a little claustrophobic. I think we need to break out of it. So I'm going to turn to the audience, to our group here, and I have two questions that I wrote down. First, I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Dr. Kelly Shanahan. And Kelly, tell us briefly about how you got to be here and what you're involved in, and how does it benefit you and the rest of the community.
Thank you, Sharon. As Sharon mentioned, I was a physician in my former life. I was not a breast surgeon. I was an OB/GYN. So I did a lot of breast exams, that's for darn sure, ordered a lot of mammograms, and was probably the point person for the majority of women in my community, my patients that were diagnosed with breast cancer. I myself was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer in 2008 on an early mammogram. It had been missed on a prior mammogram. I was stage 2B. I chose to have a bilateral mastectomy because I live in a small town that has orthopedic surgeons coming out the wazoo, but no oncologists, no breast surgeons, no breast reconstructive surgeons, and no radiation services, including radiation therapy. And I just didn't have time to drive 45 minutes each way for 5 minutes of radiation therapy, Monday through Friday for 7 weeks. I had a 9-year-old daughter. My daughter was 9 at the time. So I chose to have a bilateral mastectomy. I had one positive lymph node with a barely a micro metastasis in it. I did chemotherapy. I had my reconstruction. I went on a hormone blocker, and I went about my life. Like 25 to 30% of people, the 25 to 30% you don't hear about in the early detection saves lives trope, I was diagnosed with metastatic disease 5 years later. I had just written an article for my local newspaper about, yay, 5 years, rah, rah, in October, in Pinktober. And then the next month I had to go, oh, JK. I had metastatic disease in every bone in my body. I had fractured a vertebrae. I was about to fracture my leg. The day after my diagnosis was the last day I operated on another person, because I had surgery myself to put a rod in my femur 6 days after diagnosis. We don't have an oncologist, but ironically, I was subletting my office one day a week to an oncologist. I saw him, put me on a very, very unconventional therapy. I have since switched oncologists. I now see a huge MBC expert in San Francisco, a 4-hour drive away, and I see my local oncologist in Truckee, California, which on a good day with no tourists and no snow blocking the road is only an hour in each direction. But I've been very lucky because I've been living and living well with MBC for almost 7 years now. It did cost me my career. The unconventional IV chemo that first oncologist put me on caused permanent neuropathy. And I don't think you want somebody catching your baby or wielding a scalpel near you if that person can't feel their fingers. Fortunately, I found a place in advocacy. I started going to conferences. I went to the Living Beyond Breast Cancer Metastatic Conference, and the first time, met my tribe of other people living with metastatic breast cancer. I became involved with Medivivor, and I also became involved with this Komen Metastatic Breast Cancer Advisory Task Force, as well as the Advocacy Advisory Task Force and Komen Advocates in Science. I do grant review for Komen through the AIS process. I do grant review for Medivivor. I do grant review for the Department of Defense. And being so involved in advocacy has saved my sanity, what little sanity I had left if you talk to my family. I think one of the advantages of becoming an advocate is it has kept me from killing my family or them killing me. Because if I were home all the time without a purpose, I would be a miserable human being. And until this year, until COVID, I traveled a ton going to conferences. I should be in Seattle right now or last weekend for Linda's conference. But COVID has made that, impossible. So here we are on Zoom all together. And I'll talk a little bit later because you guys are going to listen to what all of us are doing and you're going to be going, I can't do that. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we all can be advocates, no matter what our passions are, no matter who we are, no matter what we do.
Okay, that's the vintage Kelly Shanahan. Next up, Linda, my friend Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get here? What are you doing here? And how are you involved in advocacy?
That's such a big thing to ponder. I don't know how I got here, but much like Kelly, I will say that advocacy has probably saved me in all of this, and the women on the screen have been a really big part of keeping me in a good place during the battle with NBC. My story's not common, but it's also not uncommon. The more people I meet through advocacy, the more I hear stories like this. So mine goes, at 36, I was diagnosed with a stage 0 DCIS. I had no tumors to test, possible sites of microinvasion, but that was disputed, had conflicting opinions all over the city of Seattle. I ended up doing a bilateral mastectomy and was told that I had a 2 to 3% risk of recurrence. We didn't have any tumor to test, as I mentioned, so I had no idea what my subtype was. This is back in 2001. So after the bilateral mastectomy, I sort of was advised by some high-level experts in DCIS that I could go on with my life without chemotherapy or radiation, which is exactly what I did. I had a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, a kindergartner and a preschooler at that point. And I was wary, but I really didn't understand recurrence. And when I'm pretty sure that they advised me about recurrence as I was finishing that summer of decision-making. But when I heard 2 to 3% risk of recurrence, I'm pretty sure my brain just kind of checked out and went, okay, I'm going to go raise my family. And I had been contemplating a return to work, but I did not at that point. After breast cancer, I kind of circled the wagons and stayed home with my kids. Lucky to be able to do that. As my kindergartner was graduating high school, I spent his senior year feeling symptoms, feeling lousy. My husband said to me in frustration, you say that you're exhausted all the time. What is going on? And I had symptoms a couple of years before we actually had a diagnosis. I had bone pain in my hips after running for a couple of years, but never understood it. During his senior year, my son's senior year, I had a couple of physicals and brought it up to the cancer monitor, sort of the wellness clinic. When I graduated from my oncology office, I was put into a wellness clinic for annual screening, and I told them that I had bone pain. I told my internist that I had bone pain. And everybody kind of said, well, you know, you're 48. Things don't work at 48 like they used to. But I ended up, as my son was a few weeks away from graduation, having a crisis. And we learned that I had metastatic breast cancer on a Thursday. And Saturday, I was in the emergency room because a pain that had been growing on my face, pain and numbness, dropped me to my knees. And we ended up learning that there was a tumor on a facial nerve, very unusual, causing me tremendous pain. I had also had spread to my brain and mets throughout my body. I had a broken rib. I had a met pressing on my spinal cord. And in a flurry of activity, we got me in for radiation to the spinal cord first, or to the met pressing on that to prevent paralysis. And then I quickly had brain radiation through a gamma knife procedure. And they also treated the tumor on the facial nerve with gamma knife. For the first year, I told no one that it was metastatic. I couldn't say the word. And we did not want to, you know, terrify our teenagers. So took me a while to get my feet underneath me, had a hysterectomy, oophorectomy right away. We learned at the point of metastasis that it was ER positive. And yeah, it was a really horrible year. At this point, I've had to repeat gamma knife one time, 5 years out. So that was, the metastatic diagnosis was 2013. And in 2018, I had to repeat gamma knife to my brain. And I've been on systemic therapy for ER positive, you know, treatments ever since 2013. I am in the middle of progression right now. And, you know, I'm in a pissy mood. So I will be very blunt. And, you know, there are people who may listen to this and not be happy with what I say today, but yeah, put your big girl panties on. I'm scared. I am having a biopsy next week to see if we can get genomic information on my tumor. I have not been able to get genomic information yet. We tried a biopsy at a point of progression last year, and the biopsy was unsuccessful. I've had 2 liquid biopsies now, one on Monday, so I'm hoping that maybe a liquid biopsy plus a tissue biopsy next week will give us some answers as to what may be behind this progression. But my sense of urgency is explosive right now. And, you know, like I said, put your big girl panties on for discussion today. So thanks, Sharon.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. And we applaud when the news is good, and I don't know what you do when it's bad. I guess you cry with the person. You suffer. Linda, I love you. You are really a friend, and this breaks my heart. And the fact that you showed up today is that's who you are, Linda. You show up, and God bless you. Well, Terry, my new friend Terry, who used to be a very highly placed officer in the advertising world, and now she's what do you call it when you introduce yourself to people? What do you say you are? Do you tell them you're a metastatic patient? I mean, what else can you say? You're not an advertising executive anymore.
Right. I know sometimes I could say I was in marketing and advertising and data and analytics for 20 plus years. Sometimes I was a former. Now I introduce myself. Sometimes it depends what setting. Like here, patient advocate, metastatic breast cancer patient. I've been a metastatic patient for 6 years. I was originally diagnosed just like our other panelists here. I was early stage. I was 43. I'm single, so I've been managing this on my own with an incredible support of friends, family, and I guess partner. But yeah, so when I was 43, I was diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, nothing in my lymph nodes. I did go right away after that diagnosis. I started going to the LBBC conference for early stage so that I can learn as much as I could, and was also involved in support groups and other items, other areas to get help. But I was completely shocked when 11 years later I was having pain in my neck, and had multiple doctor visits, and it wasn't until they finally did an MRI did they notice that they thought they saw some things, they weren't sure. And it actually took about 4 months of testing to confirm a metastatic diagnosis. So I think after the shock of that, I did want to become educated as much as possible, and went back to LBBC conferences and started getting involved. That's when I learned certain things, like the low percentage of funding that there was for metastatic breast cancer, the 25 to 30% of early stagers that eventually become metastatic. Was complete shock. It felt like a betrayal almost. So I became determined to do as much as I could, but I was also dealing with how public should I be about being metastatic while I'm still in a full-time career at a big ad agency, working with Fortune 100 companies and providing guidance there. So I would do certain things as much as I could, but I wasn't full out, on my Facebook page, I'm metastatic. So that's been an ongoing decision. That was an ongoing decision for a long time. I ended up meeting Linda, I think it was in Philadelphia at one of the LBBC conferences, and we had a brainstorm that night with a couple other wonderful women, and about what else we could be doing. How can we use data, which is my world. I come from such a focus on data and analytics, and my thought is, gee, what could I do, or what could we do to help fix some of the problems that we're running across, such as how do we even keep track of how many people have metastatic breast cancer in this country. So Linda and I started brainstorming, and I was really very thankful when Linda invited me to join this prestigious group of women that were doing really out there in public, doing everything from lobbying to education to panels, and I wanted to be as much of a part of it as I could be. I recently left. I had a fracture. I was working 5 years with metastatic breast cancer, and then I had a major sacrum fracture. I couldn't walk for a long time, and so that's when I left my job. And now I'm, what do I do now that I'm not working? And advocacy is part of it, and and healing. I focus a lot on that too. So thank you for including me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I believe, we all know that Jamil is going to be a little late, so we'll let her jump in when she gets here. But
She's here.
She's here. Jamil's here.
Yeah, look at your screen. Jamil's there. Perfect timing as usual.
Oh my God, Jamil, you're up next. And what the ladies have been talking about is their own story a bit. A summary version of your story, where you are now, how you got involved, and how you got so much, I don't know, notoriety is the wrong word, but you are on good, I don't know, you've been on the morning shows, and I constantly see your face. You're so involved in speaking. tell us your story and what it is that you're involved in the world of advocacy right now, Jamil. You missed my introduction. I said you were a quantum thinker.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. Well, I was diagnosed with metastatic de novo breast cancer in 2018, and just typical married mom of 3 kids. But I had already gone through cancer ordeal with my husband. He's a colon cancer survivor, so that's why I was really shocked that I was diagnosed, because I was under the age of 40. No real signs or symptoms or anything. And I didn't have the traditional breast lump or anything like that. It was really just a cold that didn't go away after everybody else's went away. And so just pursuing with my primary doctor, asking, well, I'm still coughing. It's been a month. And then, them trying different things and it didn't work. And then they recommended a chest scan, and so I also asked for an ultrasound of my abdomen area because I felt a little pinch on my side. And it wasn't painful, but I just noticed it. That's different. And gallbladder and appendicitis issues run in my family. So I thought, well, let me just go get, an ultrasound too. And that's when they found that I had lesions in my liver. And so it's, well, why do I have lesions in my liver? Fast forward, mammogram, ultrasounds, biopsies of the liver and the breast, and come to find out I have metastatic de novo breast cancer that has spread everywhere except for my brain and my spine. And so I'm really shocked under the age of 40. Just went through this whole cancer deal with my husband. So really surprised that my kids would have 2 parents with cancer. So just really shocked. And I knew that since I'm the primary breadwinner and everybody is on my benefits, I had just started a new job 5 months prior to being diagnosed. So after a day of crying and telling my family, I said, well, I just don't want my family to just, be appended. So, I'm going to have to try to do what I got to do. So I just got my eyebrows tattooed, and um, my husband shaved my head, and I just went and bought a wig that looked like my hair and just went to work. And so I didn't disclose to my job that I had breast cancer. I just kept working. And, as I'm going on my breast cancer journey, I would be in my chemo room, and other women would come up to me and say, well, hey, you look like you're kind of handling this all right. Can you let me know what you're doing? So I started mentoring other women with breast cancer, all stages. And after a while, I think about a year later, someone had shared my story with People magazine, and they just thought it was crazy that I was still working. I had stage 4 breast cancer, and my husband had colon cancer before. So I think that's what was so attention getting, the fact that my husband had colon cancer, I had stage 4 breast cancer, but was still working, mentoring other women with breast cancer. And then after I finished my year of chemotherapy, my husband is diagnosed with kidney cancer. And so it was, that's a very attention getting story. And so I think that's the reason why I got so much attention. But because of that platform, I got involved with advocacy pretty early on because, I learned that Black women were dying at such a higher rate, 40% to 50% higher than white women. So of course, I'm a Black woman. I have stage 4 breast cancer. I want to know, what is that about? So getting involved, not just for my own personal reasons, to try to survive and be here for my family and my kids and all of that, but thinking, okay, well, I'm one of those people in my career. I'm always that project manager, come in and improve stuff, and solutions oriented. So I said, well, if I have a seat at the table, that'll make me feel better, so I could, and I'm always saying, follow the money, right? Because I'm a chief financial officer. Follow the money. What's going on here? And so just started getting involved in advocacy that way. So just sharing my story with people so they can hear about the gaps in some of our policies, on the policy front. Sharing my story so people understand that, yes, Black women do get breast cancer. Yes, we have people that are living with metastatic breast cancer, and those different types of things, and just some of the barriers that are prevalent when you're dealing with a breast cancer diagnosis. And I also think that for the past 40 years, the methodology of how we've been going about breast cancer is off in comparison to other illnesses. And so just trying to share that as much as possible where I am able to share my voice. And so being involved with Susan G. Komen locally and nationally, Living Beyond Breast Cancer, they were actually the first ones to train me through their Young Advocate program. And then I started doing grant reviews with Department of Defense Breast Cancer Research Program, did the project lead training, so I think I'm pretty knowledgeable now. And then got involved with MediViver, and then they graciously elected me to be their board president. So those are primarily the organizations that I work with. I also work with Tiger Lily Foundation, who has a program for Black women with MBC in their angel advocacy program. And so, I try to be helpful where I can, try to use my influence. And I say, we all have our corners. And I look at this committee as like we're the Avengers and we're just going out and in our, corner of the country, so to speak, or where we can be influential, we're just nudging it along and making, improvements where we can. So, thank you for having me on the panel. And, I consider you guys my girlfriends because I feel like do we talk to each other every day? I think we talk to each other every day.
It's true. It's true. Jamil, thank you so much. And I'm so honored to have these ladies here. I'm on the same committee, but I'm not metastatic, so I'm kind of an outlier. And I'm honored to be able to work with them. And I care for each one of them individually. And I've learned to really respect the work they do and how they do it when they don't feel so good. I don't know how they do it. And so I brought the audience a real gift here this morning. And I want you to take advantage of it. And I want you to ask questions. And let's really dig down and get to the bottom of what it is we can do together. So my first question to you ladies, and I'm going to start with Kelly because she I led off with her before, so we'll keep the rotation the same. Kelly, what would you most like to talk about today? What issue, what subject? If you want to talk about your onion soup recipe, that's okay too. Whatever you want to talk about, I want to know what's on your mind the most.
I'm not going to talk about my onion soup recipe because I don't use one. So
how do you cook
those of you that just, I've been making onion soup forever. You just chop up some onions. I'm doing it differently today though, because I don't have time to stand in front of the stove and slowly saute the onions. I am actually trying to roast them in the oven before I throw them in the crock pot. So I'll let you know later how that goes.
With a little sherry.
Well, the little sherry for the onions, a little wine for me, but it's, it's only 10 o'clock here on the West Coast, so I'm not drinking yet. So again, thank you for having us, Sharon. Before we start talking about some of the deep things, again, I mentioned earlier that, there may be people watching who are going, especially Jamil. First of all, I think Jamil's a vampire and doesn't need to sleep because of everything she does. And she has 3 boys she's raising as well as her husband. But sometimes people look at people like us on this panel and go, oh my God, I couldn't do that. But the first time you are in your doctor's office and you say, why are you recommending this treatment? Guess what? You're an advocate. And we all have different things we're interested in. And there's different areas of advocacy. So I think it's super important to educate yourself about metastatic breast cancer. And conferences like this, and Sharon put on an in-person metastatic breast cancer conference in LA for many years. So conferences like this, educational materials from various organizations, learn about the disease, learn your subtype, learn where your mets are, learn that vocabulary. That's super important because I think the most important part of advocacy is self-advocacy, because nobody's going to stand up for us as much as we're going to stand up for ourselves. And then if you're interested in, like, if you're a political junkie and, and you're interested in policy, there's a great need for advocacy in that space. I think a lot of us, we've just come off with Komen, with MediViver, AACR, all these other organizations, ASCO, have just had their legislative advocacy pushes up on Capitol Hill, this year virtually. In the past, it's been in person. And you can do that at home. You call up your elected representative and say, you know what, would you please support the Metastatic Breast Cancer Access to Care Act? Because people who are on disability because of metastatic breast cancer shouldn't have to wait 5 months to get benefits, and they shouldn't have to wait 2 years to get Medicare. That's advocacy. Research. I mean, with my science background, I'm passionate about research. You can, again, advocate for funding with the NIH and the Department of Defense Breast Cancer Research Program. You can contact a researcher and say, hey, I'd love to hear about your work, and do research advocacy. There's so many things. You can raise money. If you were that PTA mom, that your bake sales with your PTA raised $1,000 for the 3rd grade, guess what? We want you, because we need people to raise money for good organizations that support the metastatic community and support research. So, that's just a general thing for the audience, but I'll come back to what I think is the most important thing, and that any organization who says they're doing anything to stop deaths from breast cancer better be spending the bulk of their money and their energies on research to benefit people with metastatic disease. We're the ones dying. We're the ones where the attention should be focused, because everything that benefits us trickles down and benefits the early stagers. It's the only area in which trickle-down theory works. So, I'll say it again, research, research, research.
Okay.
Bravo.
Yeah, well said as always. Linda, what is foremost on your mind? What do you really want to talk about? You're dying to talk about it, and it can be on any part of this subject. I know that frequently you have ideas that the other people in the committee are not as familiar with, perhaps. I mean, you get down to thinking about things as basically as how the oncologist deals with their patients. I mean, you have a lot of things that you think about that are important, but what is the thing that you want to talk about today?
Okay. Yeah, we have a good amount of time, so maybe we can get into some of those clinical things too. But I'm just going to build on what Kelly said. I love Mediviver's campaign this October, which is Breast Cancer Fund the Research Month. And that says it all. In a world of, before COVID, let's say, it's a great goal to try and solve for lots of problems in the metastatic space. There are lots of problems, disparities, access, all of those things matter. But in a world of COVID, the leading breast cancer organizations, I think, need to listen to the metastatic patients. And the only thing that will save our lives is research. And in a world of COVID, research is on hold. Research is not being funded. We started out at a huge disparity. When I became metastatic, I, for the very first time, heard the statistics that up to 30% of patients with breast cancer will experience metastatic disease, either a recurrent disease like mine or being de novo like Jamil. So, and then comparatively, the last data that we have is that in the single digits, it was 7%, it may have come up slightly. The single digits are where the investment in metastatic research is. The rest of it goes to prevention, early detection, screening. So as Kelly said, I say this a lot, if we solve for metastatic disease, we've solved it. It's really unlikely that we would ever eradicate breast cancer. There is just too much in the world, environmentally, hereditary, that causes it. But if we can solve for the piece that threatens lives, that will trickle down to the early stage patient, and they won't have to worry about dying. So I'll say this, I think, we're all just in a state of trauma this year with COVID and everything else that's going on. But this is a little bit like wear the damn mask, fund the research, and then no one has to die. And there have been something like 8 new drugs in the last 5 years available to metastatic patients. And now once it becomes available to the metastatic population, you will start to see that they will release additional indications in early stage disease. The pace of discovery has accelerated, but it's not nearly where it needs to be. And the investment is not nearly where it needs to be. So fund the research. And everything else, there are lots of assistance organizations who are helping with access to care. And my opinion is there's too much repetition in the breast cancer space. And the leading organizations need to take the lead on funding the research. So there you have it.
Okay, good. Terry, what do you think? What do you want to talk about? What would you like to say?
Well, they've covered a few of the things. Obviously, all of us, I would say, funding the research is the highest priority. I think certain parts of research are particularly critical to me. I have brain mets, and one of the challenges is many people with brain mets are automatically not included in clinical trials. And so that could, that is an area of concern for me is, what can we do to kind of raise the awareness of that? I guess a few areas are critical for me. One, and I think Kelly had mentioned the access, the issue with currently, once you leave your job, and go on disability, it's 2 years till you're able to get Medicare. And we did, we've reached out to Congress, and we are getting more and more sponsors of this, the Metastatic Access to Care Act. But that's very critical for me. And because if you think about the person, once you leave your job, and let's say you have COBRA for 18 months, well, what fills in the next 6 months before you can get on Medicare? So that's one of my other concerns, is kind of making that become more visible to people. Collaboration, which has been a key part of my background, is very important, and I personally need to understand more about, are there more opportunities for collaboration between the not only the leading funders, which are the government, but the Mediviver, Komen, and other organizations. How can we improve that? I tend to look at process because of my background. So how do we categorize what kind of metadata is there out there that describes the different proposals for research, and how do we look at it together, and how do we make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, and that we're covering all the big opportunities? And then the other key area for me is updating. One of the things that I learned is that the National Cancer Institute maintains a database. It's called the SEER database. It stands for Surveillance, Epidemiology, and End Results. And it's basically it's a cancer registry that multiple states basically put in when someone is diagnosed with cancer. Some information is put in about demographics, the type of tumor it is, the date, and then the challenge here is, and this is what's used to count the number of people that have certain types of cancer. Well, unless you are de novo, like Jamil, Kelly and Linda and I are not currently in that database. And the only way that you eventually get counted is if you die. So there have been some workarounds. There are challenges in getting the data and the process to get that data fixed. And there have been some challenges done by organizations to kind of work with hospitals that have longitudinal data. But right now, we don't have a good way to know how many people, without modeling it, how many people have metastatic breast cancer, what's the percentage of recurrence, what's the survival rate. And we need accurate data if we want to get the funding that we need. So I guess those are some of my key areas that interest me and that I'd like to learn more about if we've made more progress than I'm even saying. So.
Yeah, I'm somewhat concerned about the attempts from a variety of resources to create big data. And you wonder why it has to be, why they can't collaborate together, and would that make it move faster? You've raised some very interesting things. The idea of collaboration between all of the stakeholders, I think that is something that we really need to focus on, because that gets back to the whole research issue, which is at the bottom of the top of everybody's list and at the bottom of everybody's feeling. The research issue is, yesterday we heard Badur Salia talk about the 10 years it takes from an idea to a resolution or an answer or a product or a treatment. 10 years is a long time. And you all wonder if you're going to be alive in 10 years to even take advantage of that. So when you're advocating, when research is the most important thing, you're not really advocating for yourself so much as you are advocating maybe for your children and your loved ones and other people. So there is, right now, you go through frequently, some of you go through hell. The treatment that you have to be on is not easy frequently. And sometimes it's terrible. And you make that choice. Do I want to live a terrible life or not? You have to make hard choices frequently. Do I want to go through this treatment? And so every day you're having to make a decision as to, am I going to live another day? Now, if if it's not so hard on you right now, it may be in the future. And how are you going to make those decisions, and what can be done to make it easier for those of you that have metastatic breast cancer right this moment? What needs to be done? Yes, we need research. But we have to be able to do more than one thing at a time. Anyway, Jamil, I know you have thought about this a lot, and I want to know, what would you like to talk about, if you could talk about anything you want? Now, if you want to talk about your sons, they're beautiful, go ahead.
Yeah, they're actually, doing virtual school. And so one of them is having issues with getting logged in. So, but what I would like to talk about is really just to co-sign what everybody else said. I mean, really, at the end of the day, metastatic breast cancer is the breast cancer you die from. So if we want to save lives, that's where the funding, that's where the focus should be at. I think if you look at other illnesses like HIV/AIDS that have accomplished being chronic illnesses, they didn't say, well, let's just focus on the HIV. We're not going to focus on the AIDS part. Let's just find it early. Let's treat the HIV, and oh, well, those people that got AIDS, we just can't deal with it until it gets there. But, let's not focus on the AIDS part. Let's just focus on HIV. Nobody does that. So,
or let's just focus on a better blood test for it, right?
Like, no, nobody, you deal with what kills you. That's what
Right.
the treatments and the and everything is supposed to be focused on. So instead of let's find it early, let's nuke it early, let's screen it early, let's detect it early, let's put all our money in finding it. What's the point of finding it and nuking it and treating it if it's still going to come back later and kill you? So let's focus on what's killing you, which is the metastasis. And that's just common sense to me, just being, I know I've only been diagnosed now for 2.5 years, but to me, that's just, glaring, obvious. Let's focus on that. And I think now that the evidence has shown that even if you do everything right, even if your uncle type score was great, even if it was a targeted, personalized treatment that was excellent, it still has a high likelihood of coming back and becoming metastatic, and that will kill you. So let's focus on what kills you. That's one thing. And so that means that metastatic breast cancer research should be at least 50% of all investment, if you think about it. I mean, breast cancer research funding should go up regardless, but at least have 50% of it be for metastatic breast cancer,
And
right?
not primary prevention,
Thank you.
not prevention of that first metastasis
Yes,
either, because
exactly.
so much of this stuff, they talk about the funding. Oh, NIH funding over the past 5 years has been 50% for
Mm,
metastatic.
right.
But if it's
And so,
prevention, that doesn't count.
right.
Mhm.
I totally agree. And I think that's really important. I think the access to care is really important. So get away from the step therapy, get away from the waiting periods, get away from all that. And also the oral treatments that are in development now, which policy has to catch up with science. Mostly all the new treatments are oral treatments at this point. They're not hooking you up to an IV. So those should be covered in the same way that IV treatments are. And I also think that health equity disparity should just be part of standard of care. If you want to get that NCI designation, if you want to be in accordance with
Right.
NCCN guidelines, if you want to be, that leading, innovator, um, we really have to have accountability and metrics to track that. Yes, your patients of color are getting the same timelines and treatment access and diagnostic workups and all of that on the same timeline and provided the same continuum of care and the same support resources and being offered, genetic testing and genomic testing and, everything that you would pretty much offer to your white patients that are being, enrolled under your care. Make sure that there's accountability and metrics to make sure that you don't have people falling through the cracks. And I think we found that in studies where everything is the same, access is equal, care is equal, and all of that, we still have disparities impacting Black people because of racism. So how about, we shed some sunshine on it so people can see it, you're held accountable, maybe add some monetary incentives in there and some appropriations in there where if you really want to have access to this funding, if you want to have this designation, then you really have to put your money where your mouth is and show that you are committed to standard of care, health equity being part of standard of care. And let's stop, beating around the bush and, uh, not really being serious about it, I guess you could say, because we're not going to change hearts and minds. This is 2020, it's baked in the cake, but we can have accountability. And I always say that your racism is not my problem. I'm a patient. I'm going to make sure that I get the care that I need to, the best care possible. And so I think that, that's low hanging fruit. If you just deal with disparities, then we could reduce the death rate significantly. So I think bottom line is if we're really serious about breast cancer, right? That's why we're all here. If we're serious about saving lives, right? Then let's talk about disparities and metastatic because that's what's killing people. So let's focus on that. And it's not negating the experience or needs of early stagers. Focusing on what kills you is going to benefit you too. Because by the time you become metastatic, guess what? There's going to be a treatment available for you. So I
And
think it's just common
and as
sense
you
at this point.
mentioned, Jamil, addressing the disparities, there have been, smart researchers who have estimated that just addressing
Hmm.
health inequities will decrease deaths by 30%.
Yep.
I mean,
Hmm.
that, and again, that's low hanging fruit. And, that is one thing that I think Komen has done well
Yes.
with the African American Health Inequities Initiative. But they need to do the same kind of thing in the metastatic space, and everybody needs to do the same thing in the metastatic space.
Right.
Why do you think it's so hard to convince anybody of your arguments and what you're saying? Why does it seem to be such an uphill battle? Is it just because the whole screening industry is a humongous economic bundle of
I
influence?
think people are used to doing what they want to do. They're used to the status quo. Change is hard. Change is uncomfortable. We've been doing it this way for 20, 30, 40 years. Why rock the boat? It's more so focused on what feels good. That's, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm, doing my part. We got the van that's going around screening everybody. We're paying for screenings. Actually, the ACA covers a lot of screenings at this point. It's
Right.
the diagnostic screenings that we really need coverage for. So instead of just talking about what makes you feel good, let's actually deal with that, what has an impact. So that's why I'm always advocating for evidence-based solutions. Let's not just roll over the same funding. Let's not just do what we've always done. Let's focus on what's actually going to be impactful and meaningful to people's lives instead of just saying, oh, we've been doing it this way since the 90s. Well, we're not in the 90s anymore.
Yeah.
Got to change
Yep.
as culture evolves and changes, and as we learn more.
Sharon, I'll weigh in here and just say that now that we're in October, I think all of us, I would assume all of us just kind of cringe when we're in October, right? Here we go again. For our listeners, here's where you can start to really make a difference, even if you are newly diagnosed like last week. Help people around you, in your family, in your circle of friends, your Facebook friends. Start to educate people that the culture of breast cancer, and I'm not pointing out any particular body here, but the whole culture of it has gotten so off track. And where they are is leading people to donate to the very lowest common denominator instead of the thing that kills us, right? And the culture is stuck in this zone of trying to raise money but not offend people, trying to raise money but not scare people. And as a result, they never address metastatic in the way it needs to be addressed. You're hearing more. There have been inroads made. There is a week that's going to be donated or dedicated to metastatic messaging this month by Komen National, but it's still not enough. And everything's just backwards. It should be the lead message that here is what we need to fix, and then everything else will get better. Everything will get better.
I totally
And so
agree.
you can start by telling people, look, if you're thinking about donating to a breast cancer cause this month because it's Pinktober, before you send your money, make sure that it is going to metastatic research, and don't mince words. It needs to go to metastatic research, metastatic treatment research. And I will have links up on my Twitter. Follow Jamil, follow Kelly, follow Terry. We will put out a few specific links that you can send out to people with confidence that it will end up in the right place. Just buying a product that has a pink ribbon on it, don't waste your money, because it probably
Think
doesn't
before
go
you
anywhere
pink.
important.
Yeah.
And the other thing we need to do is push back and say, we're not having it anymore.
Right.
That is, it trivializes it, it minimizes it, sometimes it sexualizes it, and enough. There is no room for it anymore. So
Right.
Yep.
educate yourself about who is doing the work and where their money is going, and then spread that widely as you can.
Absolutely.
Should we try to have a boycott of any pink ribbon products?
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. And call out people. I saw a very prominent, not Komen breast cancer organization who in their Instagram story yesterday had Save the Tatas and I love boobies. And believe me, I am directly emailing the leader of that organization today. And if I don't get a response, I will publicly Twitter shame this organization for sexualizing and trivializing, and also forgetting that men have breasts too, and that people die from breast cancer. And we don't all die. And I think that's one of the things. We as a society like things pretty. We like things easy. And there's nothing pretty and easy about metastatic breast cancer. But we are
feels
look at we are not all walking skeletons here.
Yeah.
Linda and I have been living with this disease for 7 years that we know of. You know, Terry, I think you're a little bit behind us. Jamil, you're going to
6 years.
But then we have our friend Sandy, who has been living well with metastatic breast cancer for 21 years. When I was diagnosed, I wasn't sure I'd see my daughter graduate from high school. Thanks to COVID, I didn't get to see her graduate from college, but she graduated from college. And she's 21 now. You know, and Jamil, you know, you want to see your little guys graduate from high school and college. Linda, you know, you've seen both of your kids graduate from college. And even if those of us that don't have families, we have milestones and things we want to do. And a lot of us are living longer. But as we've kept saying, if you fix metastatic, you fix it all. Because frankly, while I don't wish even early stage cancer of any type on anyone, you're not going to die if your breast cancer stays in the breast. And we will never, ever, 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 ever eliminate cancer. There have been, breast cancer was found in mummies from 5,000 years ago. And while it's horrible, and I wish no one had to decide to have a body part amputated or to undergo radiation or to have to be on a hormone blocking medication for 5 years or be on any kind of chemo. It's, if we can say with confidence to someone who's diagnosed with early stage breast cancer 10 years from now, you will be treated. We have this thing based on research done 10, 15, 20 years ago that will absolutely keep you from becoming metastatic. And if you are metastatic, we've got something that's going to nip it in the bud. It's going to be a chronic disease like HIV/AIDS is now, a chronic disease like diabetes. When I hear someone say metastatic breast cancer is a chronic disease, I literally want to smack them, because until the majority of people with a diagnosis can be expected with treatment to live close to a normal lifespan, it's not chronic. You know, I look at you, you know, Jamil, you were diagnosed in your 30s. If someone says, well, if you get big 20 years get you to in your 50s. That's not chronic. Even me, I was diagnosed metastatic at 53. My mother is 94. Unless I get 40 years with this disease, don't tell me it's chronic, because every woman in my family has lived into her 90s.
Yeah. Jamil, what you said, the metaphor to AIDS and HIV, I think is probably the best encapsulation I've ever heard. It's with MBC, it's kind of like we know we've got this terrible, terrible disease that takes far too many lives, 116 a day, 42,000 a year. And all we're doing is funding the blood test for it. It's really powerful when you phrase it like that.
And I know I'm coming into this thing and it's just like, well, why really focus? It just seems like the emphasis, the weight. And I'm probably because it seems that the evidence that showed that it is still very likely to become metastatic is fairly new and quantified. And so I think we have to follow the data. We have to follow the evidence. Let's focus on what's killing us. Let's focus on what's killing people from breast cancer.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
This is where, as patients, you know, you spread the word to your community of loved ones, right? And say, we have to support and call for the metastatic priority. And, you know, before you make a donation, say, I want this to go to metastatic research. I want it, you know, earmarked for metastatic research, and insist on it. You know, use Twitter, use Facebook, tweet these organizations and say, I'm not donating unless it can go to metastatic treatment.
And they could demonstrate it and prove it. Because I find that in this month where everybody's trying to fundraise, they want metastatic faces. They want everybody that's metastatic. They want the metastatic stories. They want us all on deck, lined up, sharing our stories to generate, you know, that fundraising, right? But then the money is not going to us.
Right.
What is that about?
Exactly. So we need to call BS on that. And I was in a really powerful meeting a couple of weeks ago with a metastatic brain mets patient We were with some senior executives of a major pharma company, and we did share our stories of brain metastases. She is dealing with active brain metastases. She got through her story, and some questions came in. And I mean, the executives were really, really moved. I'm absolutely going to say they were very human and empathetic with this meeting. But the patient did the most powerful thing. She said, look, I'm not just here sharing my story. I want change, and I want it now. And it, kind of had to be there, but the moment was so powerful. And the result of it was some incredible things that have been launched, initiatives to include brain mets patients in some upcoming trials. So the moment for me, I shared it with all of my NBC friends and advocate buddies. And I said, look, we need to be done sharing our stories unless there is a specific ask at the end or at the beginning or all the way through. And as everybody listening today, if you start to get involved in advocacy, if you start to get involved with your local affiliate, be wary of, what you're doing with your story, and always be on point, asking for the direct result. Expect more than just share your story and raise awareness. We're done.
Well, the one person that was living under a rock that wasn't aware of breast cancer came out from that rock several years ago. There's not enough knowledge about metastatic breast cancer. This is not Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This is Breast Cancer Action Month.
Amen.
Yep.
And the action can be to call up your legislator and ask for passage of the Metastatic Breast Cancer to Care Act, to demand that the Affordable Care Act is not dismantled. It could be in a very local level, going to your doctor and going, I've told you for 6 months that I feel like crap on this medication. What are the other options? What can you do for me? That is advocacy. And it sure as heck is doing the research that you guys have all talked about to find out where that money is going. Just don't go buy some pink ribbon thing. Don't you dare give me anything pink. Don't you dare. But if you want to do something, take that $5 that you'd go spend on a cup of Seattle-based coffee and, give it to an organization where that $5 is going to go to research.
Yeah.
Ask where your money's going. That's what we all need in not just October, but 365 days of the year, 366 on leap years.
And I need that research. When I just thinking about my experience being on chemotherapy for a year, now I'm on endocrine therapy, the median survival statistics, I know they're old, but that's still 3 years. I've been living now with MVC for 2.5 years. And, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm on this treatment now. It's working. I actually just got a new scan on, what was that, the 29th, and it was still clear. But I know that on average, you have about 28 months before something happens where it's now going to go left and I could have some new cancer popping up. And so I'm just trying to buy time until that next innovation to keep me stable and to keep my cancer at bay is available.
Yeah.
And, money for all these other things that are not going to extend my life or not save a person's life who has MBC is null and void at this point. It's like, what is the point? And if you want me involved with anything, it has to benefit MBC causes.
Right.
Yep.
And we have to have clinical trials that are more accessible to more of us, because that's where, you look at some of our friends, who are doing so well in some of these clinical trials, some drugs that have just gotten approved, and we need to be able to access clinical trials. So clinical trials, research, think before you pink. Those are all the things that are so important. And addressing the health inequities that cause Black women, Black people, because Black men with breast cancer,
Yep.
first of all, Black men get breast cancer at a higher rate than white men do.
Yep.
And Black men, just like Black women with breast cancer, die at a higher rate than white people. We've got to address all those things. We've got to be able to say the things that are uncomfortable. Racism is the reason that there are a lot of the disparities in the death rates.
Yep.
Focus on pretty pink fluffy crap is the reason that there's not as much money spent on metastatic focused research. We need to be upfront. We need to be honest. We need more people like Shannon Doherty, who just came out in an article by Kate Pickert, who's such a friend to the breast cancer and metastatic breast cancer communities, being very honest about what metastatic breast cancer is, that, yeah, we're going to die of it, but guess what? Not today. And it is because of research that we are living longer. We don't know how long people are living right now because, as Terry mentions, we need the data, and SEER doesn't collect this data, and we need all these things because, we're here, we're metastatic, we should not be written off. There are organizations that would not Komen that would love to write off the already metastasized community in favor of the early stage and preventing metastases of breast cancer at all from happening. But we're here. There are somewhere between 155 and 200,000 or so of us. Again, we don't know because the numbers aren't captured. And we deserve to be listened to. We deserve more because whatever is done for metastatic breast cancer will benefit the early stage breast cancer community.
And we could be doing all of this without that data for so long, thinking that we're doing so well, right? When you're really just prolonging the inevitable, and the death rate has not improved after all this time because we're still dying from metastatic breast cancer. So again, let's focus on what's killing us.
Well, okay, so if we continue to do what we've been doing, are we going to advance the cause? This reminds me a little bit, I don't know if you've all been to Greek diners, if you've ever looked at their menu, it's like Gone with the Wind. You go through these menus with pages and pages, and that's what the metastatic community to me seems like. There are so many different areas to focus on. And yes, the most important is the research, but if we want to accomplish something, I think that we need to be more specific. And I think that we need to narrow it down to something understandable that everybody can get behind.
I think it's very simple. We broke it down in 3 things. Policy, all of our costs should be covered. Shouldn't be any delays. Give me access to the treatment that's going to work for me. Make sure that there's money for research, and let's make sure that there's health equity. Those 3 things are going to extend lives.
Yeah.
Everything else is fluff.
Everything else is fluff.
I agree, but I think that if you want to get people to line up behind you, and let's charge that hill, you know what direction you have to go in, and you know what you have to do. So is there something that we can agree on would be a step that's going to make a change? Because we've been saying the same things so articulately for so long, and it doesn't seem to make enough of a difference. So I think we have to think creatively about how to approach this to be able to engage enough people to make a difference. Right now, it's like, the group of you, the few of you are just, crying in the wilderness. And I think you need to have some kind of a more specific thing to go after and deal with that and get everybody behind that item, that thing.
Okay. You want me to be specific? You really want me to be specific? I'll be specific.
Go, Kelly.
Donate your money to Medivivor, where 100% will go to research. And we are funding new research this year. That's how you can make a difference for people with metastatic disease, which in turn will make a difference for people with early stage disease. Forget the pink pom-poms. Forget the rah-rah survivor bullshit hockey.
I think
Fund
it's very
research. And if you
Look-
want to guarantee that your money's going to research, give it to Metaviver. If you
So
want,
is that the charge? Is that going to
That's my
move the
charge.
needle? Is that going to move the
it's
needle
moving the
enough?
needle. It is moving the needle already.
the general public needs to understand that breast cancer is not solved, that people are still dying from breast cancer in significant numbers. And I think that's what we really need to focus on as far as that call to action. Put your money towards organizations that are funding metastatic breast cancer research.
Okay.
You know, we've
I have-
studied everything
Absolutely.
else
Yeah.
out the wazoo. You know, let's focus on what's killing us. And breast cancer is not solved. It's
Right.
so surprising to me,
That's the
like
message.
being in
That's-
People magazine, going on Good Morning America. People don't know that people are still dying from breast cancer. They
Yep.
think that this is
That's-
some foregone conclusion. It's only a small group of people. No,
That's because we don't
people are
tell them
still
the
dying
data.
from breast cancer.
That's because we don't tell them the data. There
Right.
are Metaviver uses the data. The NBC Alliance is the source of a lot of data on NBC statistics, which it's hard to get for the reasons that others have talked about. But they are updating their landscape report, which first came out in 2014. They're doing a major update of it now. So I hope to be able to share more current statistics. But as of the last writing, the numbers that everybody should leave this session with are that up to 30%, and I believe it may even be more,
Mhm.
of patients with breast cancer will experience metastatic breast cancer. They will either be diagnosed at the metastatic stage 4, at the
6 to
beginning,
10%.
like Jamil, that's called de novo, or they will experience a recurrence after an early stage diagnosis 2, 5, 10, 20 years later, like I did, like Kelly did, like Terry did. So up to 30%. And I'm going to say on a tangent, it's at least 30% because we are dealing with underreporting, not overreporting.
Right.
So you can feel very
Now-
confident saying that number. The other number that we need to say is that a vast imbalance is at work in the investment in research world. The vast majority of dollars still go to that better HIV blood test. You know, they still go to prevention screening and, you know, all things early stage, when it should be the exact opposite. We could take a moratorium on funding early stage stuff and just focus on metastatic for a couple of years and start to catch up. That's what we've been doing for 30 to 40 years. And we have not changed the number of people dying of metastatic breast cancer every single year. The number over the last 3 to 4 decades of the breast cancer movement has not changed. The death rate has gone down, and you may hear that, but that's because the population's gone up.
Yes.
The number of deaths hasn't changed.
Right.
So
We're spinning our wheels
And
doing the same
doesn't
thing
work.
without
Right.
actually accomplishing the goal.
Right.
Right.
And
And
so the last, can I
helps
just say
other
the last
cancers.
thing? Oh,
Terry,
I just want to say that it really, really just fries me when there are leading entities in the breast cancer space who will not share these numbers. They'll share that 1 in 8 women, they always say women, will get breast cancer. Okay, fine. That's the early stage message. The metastatic message is 30% of that 1 in 8 will experience metastatic. So 1 in 3 of the 1 in 8 will experience metastatic. Say the numbers, say the data. You don't get people's attention by just telling stories and getting people to feel it. You have to tell them the truth.
Yes.
And that's what gets people's attention. And then bring it to life through a story. But we're not hearing the numbers. We're not hearing the statistics. People fight over the statistics. And really, there's nothing to fight about. It is what it is.
Right.
You know,
And
Now,
you
one
can't solve a
thing-
problem you can't see.
Yeah.
I hear something here that's interesting. And I don't know if it was you, Jamil, or who said it. I think it's you, Jamil, where we're talking about with all different kinds of health issues, we are focused on the front end and not on the back end where the,
Right, which is not like other illnesses that are successful.
but you know, how many other illnesses is it the same thing? You talked about AIDS,
I can't think of any.
HIV. Well, maybe, okay,
Even
but
COVID.
what I'm getting at is that, you know, if you enlarge the army behind you, if there are other diseases where this also is happening, so that the message then comes, a broader message where you're
I'm not
saying,
aware of any other illnesses where they focus on, let's just find it early.
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's, I was hoping that there were,
And I wanted to also say, before I let Terry go, that metastatic breast cancer also benefits metastatic ovarian cancer. And now we're finding that the metastatic breast cancer immunotherapies in development are helping with COVID-19 treatment.
Right.
So it's just like,
And conversely, that, you know, some of the treatments for advanced stage and metastatic lung cancer may benefit breast cancer.
mhm.
You know, and right, really interesting. Some of the techniques used in metastatic breast cancer research are now being used with COVID.
Mhm.
So, you know, again, we don't want to focus on funding the test, because all the test does is find what's already there. It's true with COVID. And you can use this with COVID, that if fixing metastatic breast cancer was like everybody wearing a mask, staying 6 feet away and washing your hands and avoiding indoor spaces, that is what's going to fix things. Yeah, we need the tests. No, we're not saying that nothing should be done to help early stage breast cancer. But if you want to not die from breast cancer, you have to focus on dealing with people that are already metastasized and figuring out how to keep those of us that are already metastasized, keep us from dying. And it's going to keep the millions of people that follow us that will be diagnosed with breast cancer from dying.
okay, so.
Can I ask?
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for the other folks on this panel. So obviously we and everyone, you know, in the metastatic community can be donating to Mediviver and obviously to directly to metastatic research funds. But the majority of funding for research in breast cancer comes from the government, right?
Mhm.
From the DoD and from you know, the NIH. And so the question I have for this group, you know, we've lobbied different things. Some of you have been to Congress more than I have. What types of resistance are we getting from the NIH as to why aren't they increasing? I mean, I know they need the funding from Congress and funding had been cut, but about, you know, what type of resistance are we seeing as far as the percentage of breast cancer research going towards metastatic disease? Is anybody?
Well, a lot of what we get from NIH and researchers in general is like, well, I'm working on prevention. It's like, yeah, but we also need to work on these treatments. Also, when Congress appropriates the money, the organization, the DoD, for example, can do with it what they will. Now, Congress can do something called a congressional ask, where they can say, hey, DoD, we want you to focus on metastatic cancer. Not even necessarily metastatic breast. And if there was more money for metastatic lung research and metastatic colon research, I would be happy too, because it's going to help all of us with advanced and metastatic disease. So Congress can do an ask. So for fiscal year 19, for the first time, Congress did direct the DoD to have a metastatic cancer task force. So, and to request proposals focusing more on metastatic disease. You know, and I don't think it's quite the same with the NIH, because it's the difference between a budgeted item and an appropriation. I don't get it. Jamil might get it because it's money. I don't get money. But that's the thing. And then again, is in, you know, when for those of us that go to conferences or have contact with researchers, it's constantly kind of going, you know, I really hope that you will consider doing metastatic focused research, you know, not prevention. but research focused on the already metastasized. And if organizations like Komen, like BCRF, like Mediviver, do requests for proposals, asking for that. Mediviver gets a ton of proposals, and every single one of ours says must be something that will lead to benefit for the already metastasized patient. So if more organizations did that, we'd get more focused research.
Right.
Yep.
So
And
is there a
Kelly's
benefit
exactly right.
for our community to be pushing again 2020, or if with the next, with the next time Congress is
Oh yeah.
in session, like how do we organize, if we want to come up with steps that we can take, organize a congressional ask, and with real stats and, really pushing for that? Is it?
Well, Komen's policy team is stellar. Stellar policy team. I mean, like, kudos, Molly and Rebecca. I mean, you guys are the bomb. And so Komen does really good policy and advocacy work. Mediviver does as well. AECR does. So one of the things is that, for this upcoming, for next year, is
Right.
to get to talk to the policy teams at these organizations and go, hey, could you let's make this one of the asks, focusing on metastatic research, one of the
And
asks.
I've seen the changes. I've seen,
that's how we got the DoD task force.
I need to break in a
Organizations
minute.
asking for
Ladies,
We
I
gotta
need
go,
to break
huh?
in a minute. Our time is running out. We can let this run and we can do parallel programming, because what you'd be competing with is a video. So we can continue on with this conversation. Do you want to do that?
I personally have to go.
Okay. So would you consider this? Would you consider coming back later in the month and continuing the conversation? Because I'm taking notes here and I'm starting to, my head is going, the top's coming off, but I'm seeing something different here. And I would love for you to come back and continue the conversation. How many of you would do that, and when would you like to do that?
I think that needs to go offline. Send us a doodle poll. I do not have stock. I know Linda's laughing. Okay. I do not have stock in doodle because I'm always like,
the first question is, are you willing to come back sometime this month if we can arrange a convenient date?
Yes,
of course.
Yes.
Thumbs up, ladies. That was amazing. We have questions too that we didn't
Sharon,
have.
you worried that we wouldn't have stuff to talk about.
Pardon me?
You were worried we wouldn't have stuff to talk about.
I never worried about that, Kelly. Not with you here. You kidding? And Jamil and Linda and Terry? No.
Sharon, are there any questions that you feel like we should try and address before we jump off? Kelly, I know you may need to go. I could stay on if there's anything pressing for someone.
No, I think that we can deal. I think that they're more general, and I think that we can have a chat room designed just for this, and you can drop in and talk to people if you want to. I know that some of you are going to be at the New York conference tomorrow, and how the conversation will be steered, I don't know. That's Tori's department. But I really think that you're onto something here, and I really would like you to continue the conversation, because I think we have to get out of the damn box. I think we have to think outside the box and do something different than we have been. And I think that you ladies are key. You get together and you're great together. Your energies just kind of merge together, and it's like you're all plugged in like computers. You're all together, and I think you could come up with really cool ideas. So I'm going to send a doodle poll. Let's try to get you together. Maybe we even get some other people to join. But I think the dialogue is too important, and we have this platform, and I've got hours of programming, and I can find a place. I can find a place where you all can meet and continue, if you will.
I do I want to suggest that if people are really engaged on this subject, Twitter is where it happens. And these are people that you really want to follow. Kelly, Jamil are powerhouses. So get involved in the discussion. That way you can private message us. And if you want to get connected, we'll help you get connected. If you've got a fire in your belly for this, it isn't agita, come join us.
Absolutely. Ladies, I thank you so much.
Thank you, Sharon, for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for making this happen, Sharon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Bye.